Hello, Zenith women, and welcome to the channel. Some girls were raised on lullabies, others were raised on silence, side eyes, and survival mode. Sounds dramatic? It's not. It's just Tuesday in the life of a Sigma female. What if I told you that some of the most composed, mysterious, and emotionally self-sufficient women you know were once little girls who mastered the art of invisibility, not because they wanted to, but because they had to? Here's the twist nobody talks about. Studies show that emotionally neglected children often grow into hyper-independent adults, and Sigma females, they're the poster girls. But don't mistake the calm for peace. That I don't need anyone energy, it was forged in childhood fires where comfort was rare, connection was conditional, and trust was a luxury. They weren't raised, they survived their raising. And while everyone praises the Sigma female's strength, independence, and mystique, no one ever asks her how she got that way, because the truth is uncomfortable. It's not wrapped in fairy dust, it's wrapped in childhood memories she doesn't talk about, but that shaped her into the lone wolf the world can't figure out. So if you think you know Sigma females, you're about to find out what really built her. And spoiler alert, it wasn't yoga, crystals, or Pinterest quotes. Let's go deeper, way deeper. Number one, she was the fixer even before she was broken. She was the fixer even before she was broken. Long before she even knew what emotional boundaries were, the Sigma female was already cleaning up messes that weren't hers. She was the one calming down her mother after an argument with Dad, the one smoothing things over when her siblings fought, the one trying to keep everyone in the house emotionally stable, even though she barely understood her own feelings. That was her role, not because she chose it, but because no one else stepped up, and life forced her to. People called her mature for her age, but really she was just exhausted. She learned to read moods like survival maps. If someone slammed a door, she was already on high alert. If someone started crying, she became the therapist. If someone lost their temper, she shrunk herself to avoid becoming the next target. Fixing other people's chaos became her way of staying safe. If she could solve the problem, maybe she wouldn't become one. But here's the part no one talks about. She was doing all this while silently falling apart inside. No one noticed her cracks. No one asked how she was doing, and even if they did, she didn't know how to answer. She didn't have time to be broken. She couldn't afford to fall apart, because if she fell apart, then who would hold everything together? So she became what everyone needed: calm, composed, dependable. She listened to everyone's pain but had no space to speak her own. She poured into others until she was emotionally dry, then blamed herself for feeling empty. That's what childhood looked like for her. A silent struggle to keep everyone afloat while no one realized she was drowning too. That's why adult Sigma females are so emotionally sharp, why they don't flinch in chaos, why they don't chase attention or beg for validation. They've already done the emotional heavy lifting since before they even understood the weight. But being the fixer comes with a price. Now she struggles to accept help. She doesn't trust ease, and sometimes even in peace her mind is bracing for the next storm, because growing up, being the fixer didn't just become her role, it became her identity. Number two, she wasn't allowed to be angry. She wasn't allowed to be angry, not loudly, not visibly, not even a little. If she ever raised her voice, she was told she was being disrespectful. If she questioned something unfair, she was too much. If she showed any emotion that didn't look like obedience, it was shut down immediately. Anger, for her, wasn't treated like a human feeling. It was treated like a personal failure. So she learned to bury it. She clenched her fists under the table, bit her tongue until it stung, smiled when she wanted to scream. And slowly that rage stopped being loud. It stopped being fire. It turned into something colder, calculated, controlled, internal. But it never disappeared. It just went silent and deep. As a child, no one taught her how to process anger, only how to avoid it. So instead of slamming doors, she slammed her emotions into locked rooms inside her. Instead of yelling, she shut down. Her silence became her shield, because being angry made her bad, and being good was the only way to survive. Over time, this shaped her into a woman who never lashes out, but also never forgets. She doesn't explode, she evolves. Her rage didn't burn her alive, it taught her emotional precision. It gave her a kind of power that's hard to describe but impossible to ignore. And now, she still doesn't show her anger like most people do. You won't see her shouting or throwing things, but you'll feel it. In her stillness, in her stare, in the way she removes herself from a room without a word, leaving you with nothing but your own guilt. Her anger is quiet, sharp, and permanent. She won't beg, argue, or prove her point. She'll just become unreachable because growing up she wasn't allowed to be angry, so now she doesn't waste it. Number 3, she learned to hide her joy because it made others jealous. She learned to hide her joy because it made others jealous. As a child, every time she shared something that made her happy, a good grade, a new idea, a little win, there was always someone ready to put her back in her place. Maybe it was a snide comment. Maybe it was a backhanded compliment disguised as a joke. Or maybe it was just the uncomfortable silence that followed, as if her happiness was somehow offensive. Either way, the message was loud and clear: don't shine too bright. At first, she didn't understand it. She thought joy was meant to be shared, but the reactions taught her otherwise. Instead of claps, she got criticism. Instead of hugs, she got side eyes. She noticed how her excitement made people around her uncomfortable and how her light seemed to bring out other people's shadows. So she started dimming it. She became careful with her words. She downplayed her achievements. She learned to celebrate quietly in private where no one could twist it into something ugly. Her wins became secrets. Not because she was ashamed of them, but because sharing them always came at a cost. That's the thing no one tells you about emotionally neglected girls. They don't just shrink from pain. They shrink from joy too. Especially when they've been trained to believe that happiness is dangerous, that it makes you a target, that it's something to be earned and rationed, not felt freely. Now, as a Sigma woman, she still struggles with this. People call her humble, mysterious, or low-key, but the truth is, she's just protecting her peace. She's learned that not everyone clapping is rooting for her, that some people show fake support while secretly hoping she fails. So she learned to savor her joy without needing an audience. She doesn't post every win, she doesn't overshare, she keeps her glow quiet, not because it's small, but because she knows how powerful it is and how quickly the wrong people try to steal it. Number 4, her sensitivity was weaponized against her. Her sensitivity was weaponized against her. As a child, she felt things deeply: joy, pain, confusion, disappointment. But instead of being told that her emotions were valid, she was made to feel like they were a problem. The moment tears welled up in her eyes, she was told to toughen up or stop being dramatic. When she asked hard questions or called out unfairness, she was labeled too much, too intense, or too sensitive, as if her emotions were some kind of defect, so she learned to shut it all down. She started holding back tears until her throat ached. She swallowed her words, second-guessed her feelings, and trained herself to stay quiet even when everything inside her was screaming. Every time she showed emotion, someone twisted it, used it against her, made her feel weak for having a heart that noticed everything. Eventually, she stopped expressing herself, not because she didn't feel, but because she knew no one would handle it with care. The world didn't know what to do with a girl who felt deeply and thought critically, so it silenced her. And she took that silence and turned it inward. Her mind became a battlefield between what she felt and what she was allowed to show, between who she was and who she had to pretend to be. Now, as a Sigma woman, she's mastered emotional control, but not because she lacks emotion. Quite the opposite. She feels everything, she just doesn't advertise it. She analyzes instead of reacts. She observes instead of interrupts. And if you ever see her quiet, it's not because she has nothing to say, it's because she's already had the argument in her head 50 times and decided it's not worth the energy. Her calm isn't natural. It was conditioned, forged from years of being misunderstood, dismissed, or punished for caring too much. So now she guards her sensitivity like a fortress, not because she's cold, but because she knows how cruel the world can be to women who feel too deeply. Number 5, she became addicted to solitude because people felt unsafe. She became addicted to solitude because people felt unsafe. When she was younger, being around people meant walking on eggshells. Every room felt like an emotional minefield. One wrong word, one shift in tone, and everything could explode. She was constantly scanning for signs. Was someone upset? Was that sarcasm or anger? Was she the reason behind the sudden silence? It was exhausting, and it trained her nervous system to never fully relax around others. So she started retreating, not because she hated people, but because solitude didn't require emotional decoding. In her own space, she didn't have to read between the lines, fake a smile, or brace for a passive-aggressive jab. Alone, she could breathe. Alone, she didn't have to perform. What began as a coping mechanism slowly turned into her safe zone. People always say, she's just introverted, or she likes being alone. But they don't see the truth behind it. Solitude was never just a preference, it was protection. It was the only place she felt like her energy wasn't under attack, where her emotions weren't up for judgment, where she could simply exist without constantly managing someone else's mood swings, projections, or insecurities. That's why Sigma females are so emotionally self-contained. They learned early that people can be unpredictable, and connection often came with a price, self-abandonment. So they stopped chasing connection. They stopped trying to be understood. They stopped hoping people would finally get them. And instead they leaned into their own world, where peace wasn't just a word, it was a requirement. Now, people think she's distant, unapproachable, mysterious. But what they don't know is that she had to build that distance brick by brick to survive emotionally, that her solitude isn't loneliness, it's armor. It's where she recharges, reflects, and resets after years of being emotionally drained by others. She didn't become this way overnight. And she didn't choose solitude because she was born a lone wolf. She chose it because for her, the alternative was constant emotional survival. And no one should have to live like that. Number 6, she was the mirror nobody could handle. She was the mirror nobody could handle. Even as a child, she had a way of making people uncomfortable without saying a word. Her presence was quiet, but piercing. She noticed things others ignored. She asked questions that cut too deep, and she had a calm kind of confidence that didn't need permission to exist. That alone was enough to rattle people who had spent their whole lives pretending to be more put together than they actually were. She didn't try to outshine anyone, she didn't seek attention or play power games, but somehow just her being in the room stirred something in others, something they didn't want to face. Her self-awareness highlighted their lack of it. Her emotional depth made their surface-level thinking obvious. Her refusal to follow the crowd exposed their need to be liked. She became a mirror, and people didn't like what they saw staring back at them. Even adults couldn't handle her. Teachers, parents, relatives, they were unsettled by how much she saw and how little she spoke. They projected their own insecurities onto her, labeled her as arrogant, rebellious, or too quiet for her own good. But the truth is, they were just uncomfortable being seen by someone who didn't accept their filtered version of reality. She wasn't rude, she wasn't loud, she simply didn't shrink. And that in itself felt like a threat. Over time, she learned to downplay herself to avoid the tension. She stopped asking the hard questions. She started holding back her thoughts. Not because she lacked confidence, but because she was tired of making people flinch with her truth. She realized people don't always want honesty, they want comfort. And she was never built to sugarcoat reality. That's why Sigma females move the way they do. They've spent their whole lives being punished for seeing clearly, for existing fully, for showing people their own reflection without even trying. So now they don't bother proving anything. They just keep being the mirror, unbothered, unapologetic, and still making people uncomfortable without lifting a finger. Number 7, she was the parent before she was a child. She was the parent before she was a child. While other kids were worrying about losing crayons or picking a seat at lunch, she was worrying about whether the adults in her life were okay. She noticed when her mum was overwhelmed. She could sense the tension in a room before anyone spoke. She figured out how to comfort others, how to calm tempers, how to fill in emotional gaps, long before anyone thought to check if she needed comforting too. She never got the luxury of being carefree. Her childhood was not a place for soft landings or messy learning. It was a crash course in emotional survival. She became hyper-aware of people's moods because she had to. If she didn't sense the shift, someone might lash out. If she didn't soothe the chaos, it would swallow everything. So she became the peacekeeper, the listener, the emotional fixer, the one who just knew what to do. And because she was so good at it, people leaned on her without even realizing how unfair it was. She was the go-to for advice, the emotional sponge, the little grown-up who could be counted on. But what nobody asked was, who did she get to lean on? Who was there when she needed a soft place to land? She was praised for being mature for her age, but that praise was a cover-up for neglect. No one noticed that her maturity came from being forced to skip entire stages of childhood. She didn't get to be wild or messy or loud. She didn't get to fall apart. She was holding everyone else together. So she built strength in silence, emotional intelligence in isolation. She became her own support system because no one else stepped in. And now she's fiercely independent, highly intuitive and emotionally grounded, but not because life made it easy. She's that way because life never gave her a choice. While her peers were learning how to braid hair or write in diaries, she was learning how to process grief, mediate conflict, and absorb emotional pain like it was second nature. She didn't grow up too fast. She was never given the chance not to. Number 8, her silence wasn't shyness, it was survival. Her silence wasn't shyness, it was survival. People saw a quiet little girl and thought she was just reserved, maybe a little awkward, maybe just one of those shy kids. But they were wrong. Her silence wasn't about timidity, it was a shield, a strategy, a carefully crafted survival mechanism that kept her safe in places where words could be dangerous. She had already learned, early and brutally, that speaking up could make her a target, that asking questions might get her snapped at, that expressing herself might trigger someone else's insecurity or anger. So she chose the safest option: stay silent, stay small, stay unseen. Not because she wanted to, but because it was the only way to reduce the risk of emotional landmines. Behind that quiet exterior was a hyper-aware little girl who was constantly reading the emotional weather in the room, who was smiling when she sensed tension, nodding when she didn't agree, and shrinking when she wanted to scream. Her silence wasn't peaceful, it was alert. It was a watchtower, scanning every expression, every tone, every subtle shift in body language to calculate her next move. People underestimated her, and that was part of the plan. If they thought she was just quiet, they wouldn't look too closely. They wouldn't ask too many questions. They wouldn't realize how much she saw, how much she understood, how much she was holding back. And that invisibility gave her space to breathe, observe, and avoid becoming someone's emotional punching bag. She grew up in survival mode, reading people like textbooks, staying 10 steps ahead of everyone emotionally, managing her reactions with surgical precision. So now, as a Sigma woman, her silence still confuses people. They call her mysterious, distant, cold. But that's silence. That silence is intelligence, it's protection, it's her superpower. Because once you've been in environments where being too visible meant danger, you don't speak just to fill space. You speak when it matters, you speak when it's safe. And if that moment never comes, you stay silent, not out of fear, but out of mastery. She was never shy. She was just surviving in a world that didn't know how to listen without hurting. Number 9, she was punished for her independence early on. She was punished for her independence early on. From the start, she didn't fit into the mold that the world tried to shove her into. She questioned things, simple things that children should be curious about, like, why do we do it this way? Or what if there's a different way to think about this? But instead of being encouraged to think for herself, she was reprimanded, told to stay in her place and stop being difficult. Adults didn't know how to handle her questions because they had grown comfortable with the status quo. And that's when she learned that curiosity wasn't always seen as a virtue. It could be a threat. Her free spirit made others uncomfortable. It disrupted the routines they had painstakingly built. When she wanted to explore, when she wanted to go beyond the narrow path they had set for her, they controlled her, reined her in, and put labels on her: rebellious, troublesome, unmanageable. As if her independent thinking was an act of defiance, as if it was wrong to have ideas that didn't align with theirs. She was punished for the very thing that made her different, for daring to want more than what she was told she could have. The more she pushed against their limitations, the more they clamped down on her, forcing her to shrink back into a version of herself that was easier to control. But that never worked, not really, because deep inside the fire of independence never burned out. It just became quieter, more strategic. Now, as a Sigma woman, that same independence still burns bright, but in a much more subtle way. She doesn't need to challenge every idea openly or make noise about her thoughts. She's learned how to carve out space for herself in a world that doesn't always want to give her room. She knows that the less she conforms, the more powerful her autonomy becomes. She's not rebellious anymore, she's just herself, unapologetically. And she won't let anyone ever again try to make her feel wrong for it, because she knows her freedom isn't something anyone has the right to control. not anymore. Number 10, being the responsible one. Was her trauma bond? Being the responsible one was her trauma bond. From a young age, she was labeled as mature for her age, a compliment that hid a much darker reality. Because she seemed like she could handle anything, adults handed her their emotional baggage without a second thought. She became the one they leaned on, the one they poured their frustrations, fears, and secrets into. And she, being the good kid, took it all in stride. But there was a hidden cost, one no one ever saw. She never got the chance to be just a child. While others her age were making messes, fighting over toys, or losing themselves in simple play, she was holding adult-sized problems. She was the one who consoled a crying parent, comforted a stressed-out teacher, or kept quiet when the house was tense. No one ever asked if she needed someone to talk to. They just assumed she could bear the weight. They thought her maturity made her bulletproof, but in reality, it made her a sponge for emotional overload. By the time she reached her teenage years, she was carrying everyone's secrets and unspoken fears. She became a silent counselor to her family, friends, even strangers, all while having nowhere to unload the heaviness she carried. No one thought to check in on her. They didn't even realize that she too needed to let go of the weight she was quietly hoisting every day. It wasn't about being responsible, it was about survival. If she didn't play the role, she feared the chaos would become too much. She took on the burden of others' emotions because it was easier than confronting her own. It was safer to stay busy, to be the rock, to be the one who kept everything together. But in doing so, she lost pieces of herself. She lost her childhood. She lost her right to be a kid without the world's burdens on her shoulders. Now, as an adult, she's learned to put boundaries in place, to protect herself from carrying others' emotional weight. But the trauma bond lingers. She's always the one who's expected to manage, always the one people turn to for strength. And while she's learned to say no, a part of her still struggles with the expectation that she should be the responsible one who can handle it all. She didn't ask for that role, but she played it, because sometimes when you're made to feel like the only one who can carry the load, you do it, no matter how heavy the burden. Number 11, emotional abandonment in a house full of people. Emotional abandonment in a house full of people. On the outside, it looked like a perfectly normal home. The kind of house where everyone assumed the child was loved, cared for, and had all their needs met. But behind closed doors, the reality was different. There was no emotional connection, no sense of being truly seen. She was physically present, but emotionally invisible, often overlooked, underappreciated, and never really validated. Her parents, busy with their own struggles or trapped in their own emotional turmoil, provided the basics. The roof was over her head. The meals were on the table. But something was missing. She was given the stuff of childhood, clothes, toys, a safe space to sleep, but not the attention or love that nurtures emotional growth. Her feelings were often dismissed as too much, too loud, or simply unimportant. If she needed to talk, there was never anyone truly listening. And if she dared to express any emotion beyond what was expected, it was met with silence or indifference. In a way, it was like living in a house full of people, yet still being alone. The emotional distance was like an invisible wall, one that kept her from ever truly connecting with the people she was supposed to be closest to. She might have been in the same room as her family, but they were worlds apart, each trapped in their own bubble of unspoken emotions and unmet needs. She learned early that it was safer to keep things to herself. Asking for attention or validation only made the void more apparent. She grew accustomed to filling her own emotional needs. When she cried, she was told to toughen up. When she sought comfort, she was told she was being too sensitive, so she stopped asking. She learned to swallow her emotions, pushing them down deep to avoid the pain of rejection. But that didn't stop the hurt from piling up. It just made her better at hiding it. As an adult, that emotional abandonment shaped the way she approached relationships. She became fiercely independent, unwilling to rely on anyone for validation. She built walls around her emotions, guarding herself from the hurt she learned to expect. People around her didn't understand why she didn't ask for help or why she was so self-sufficient. But the truth was, she had learned to survive without anyone truly being there for her. It wasn't that she didn't need love or care, she just never learned how to ask for it. She had spent too many years in an emotional desert to ever believe that someone would come through for her when she needed it most. In the end, the childhood trauma of Sigma females isn't just a chapter in their story, it's the foundation of their unshakable strength. They've navigated a world that tried to diminish their light, taught them to shrink and hide, only to rise from it all with an armor forged in silence and self-reliance. Their past, with all its emotional neglect and battles, isn't something that defines them. It refines them. They've learned to protect their hearts, to guard their energy, and to trust their instincts in ways that few can truly understand. These women have become masters of their own resilience, creating lives not shaped by what they've endured, but by how they've transcended it. The walls they built aren't cages, but shields, carefully crafted to protect the most precious parts of them. They might not always let you in, and they won't apologize for it. But when they do, it's a rare and sacred privilege. If you earn their trust, if you've shown you're worth it, you'll witness a force so powerful, so unapologetically raw, it could change your world forever. So to the Sigma female, thank you for your strength, your quiet resilience, and for showing us all that survival doesn't mean submission. It means evolution. You didn't just survive your past. You transformed it into the powerhouse that you are. And in a world that tries to break you down, that is something no one will ever take from you. If this resonated with you, if you found power, truth, and strength in these words, then don't let this moment pass by. Hit that subscribe button to join a community of like-minded individuals who understand what it truly means to rise above. Tap that like button if you felt the weight of these words and want to see more content that empowers, enlightens, and challenges you. Your voice matters here. Let's keep building each other up and embracing the strength we've all cultivated in our journeys. Subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss the kind of content that speaks directly to your soul. Together, we are unstoppable. Keep pushing forward, keep thriving. See you in the next video. You in?